Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We've taken a look at a fair bit of Walt Simonson comics over the course of this channel. I covered most of his Fantastic Four run. We've taken a look at a couple of issues of his Thor run, his legendary Thor run. We also looked at issue 1 of his creator-owned Star Slammers series. We even looked at Cyberforce number 0, although that was a long time ago. That video is probably not very good. I haven't watched that in a long time. But one thing we haven't covered at all is his DC output, and there's actually quite a bit of it. So we're going to take a look at ORION number 1 today, which is based off of Jack Kirby's Fourth World characters. I say characters, it's really more of a mythology, as most things with Jack Kirby kind of are. The whole deal with the Fourth World is that they were meant to be new gods to replace the old pantheon. Jack Kirby came up with them while he was working at Marvel, and he was getting kind of dissatisfied with his treatment there. Never thought he got enough credit, didn't think he was getting enough money, probably right on both counts. Kept getting jerked around by management and undercut by Stan Lee, and this was around the time of his breaking point, where he was just starting to decide that it wasn't worth working at Marvel anymore. The deal with the Fourth World was he wanted to end the entire Thor pantheon. He wanted to kill them all off in a battle of the gods. Basically, this new planet would come in, there would be a war of the gods, Thor and all of the Asgardians would be killed off and be replaced. And it would be this huge epic event. And naturally, Marvel didn't really want to do that because Thor was selling pretty well. And Jack didn't want to show him the new characters or get too far into the plot lines because he was afraid that he'd lose control of them. Or, they get started and then Stan Lee would swoop in and just fuck them up. So it all came to a head in 1970. Jack Kirby got fed up and quit Marvel. And he moved over to DC with this brand new concept and all these brand new characters. And the first thing DC was going to get Jack Kirby to work on was Superman, which was a wild idea. Superman was always drawn by guys like Curt Swan and had a very definitive look and feel to the book, and this was going to completely shake things up. Originally, they were going to offer him the main Superman title. I believe Jack Kirby didn't really want to do that because he didn't want to put anybody out of a job. So he was offered Superman's pal, Jimmy Snuka? So he was offered Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. That's the one. Because they didn't have a set list of creators on that thing. It was more of a rotating cast. So he started up on that and started immediately injecting his Fourth World mythology into the comic, gearing up for New Gods number 1, which introduced all sorts of characters, started with the War of the Gods that he had started in Thor. So this was basically the end of that story where all of the Asgardians got killed off and new gods rose in their wake. And it was all extremely Kirby. It was heavily rooted in mythology, making up its own mythology a lot of the time. But it was also super dynamic, and there was a lot of weird slang, because Kirby was in on that too. But probably the biggest thing about the whole New Gods thing was that it felt like it was kind of raising the bar for comics in terms of creativity. Where it's they're kind of superheroes and supervillains, if you squint and look at them, but not really. We're going bigger than that. And it's all super cosmic, and it's, fates of worlds at stake. And this was the kind of thing that a young Walt Simonson latched onto and went, oh shit, this is what I've been missing. Walt himself was kind of at a point where he was starting to get a little bit disillusioned about comics and felt like it was getting kind of stale. And then he'd read New Gods or The Forever People or Mr. Miracle, and that just got the motor running there. And Walt's always been a big Kirby fan. I mean, you can see it in his work. His artwork always looks like just kind of an elevated form of Jack Kirby, where it just takes that dynamicism and ratchets it up a few notches. A lot of his interests kind of intersect with Kirby, that focus on mythology and on sci-fi. So I guess it's kind of natural that he would have gravitated towards characters and mythologies created by Jack Kirby. And, you can see it in his bibliography. He got his start at DC. That's where he started to build his name. But when he came over to Marvel, he did a few things, at first, a few fill-in projects, but eventually he was able to get a hold of the Thor comic, and once he got a hold of that, he wasn't letting it go until he was done, and that took about 5 years. And it's, probably the best the character has ever been, apart from Jack Kirby drawing it himself. A few years later, he worked on Fantastic Four, and in my opinion, that is the best version of the Fantastic Four. So moving over to DC and moving on to the Fourth World mythology, the comic that originally blew his mind in the 70s, it's a natural progression. And I think Walt kind of pours himself more into Kirby properties than he does any other kind of comic, basically, apart from his own creator-owned stuff. So let's take a look at how he did. We could start with the cover. It's a pretty strong cover, maybe not as bombastic as I would expect a Walt Simonson number 1, and particularly a number 1 featuring characters that are very close to Walt's heart. Not quite as bombastic as I would expect for that. But we're going to get a good dynamic shot of Orion to start with, as well as a big close-up on Darkseid. Always a good idea to put Darkseid on the cover. And Orion's mother, Tigra. You know, it's fun stuff. I don't think this is the cover that he put the most thought into for this series. I've seen a couple that have better compositions. Maybe don't look like they were done quite as quickly. But, you know, it's certainly good enough for a number one. And I mean, a big part of the hype would have been Walt Simonson's drawing the new gods. You know, the cover itself doesn't have to knock your socks off in order for you to consider buying it. All right, so we're going to start off in Nebraska. And we're going to try and get like a Heartland kind of feel right away. Although also right away, we're also going to get the feeling that something is going on that's very wrong. Weird colors to start with. Like, this looks like a Preacher book. I guess this is, I mean, it's around that time that Preacher's going on. So maybe this is just kind of the direction that DC's moving right now for colors. Kind of drab, but oh well. Anyway, car drives by. And for some reason, there's a ton of kids just laid out next to a fence next to the road here. All right, so as the car approaches, the kids get up. They all start kicking around a soccer ball. And they're all happy-go-lucky and, you know, jumping all over the place. And, hey, mister, how's it going? And the guy driving by, he's all super happy himself. He's like, hey, have a good day, kids. And they're like, yeah, you too, Pops. And then as soon as he takes off down the road, they all just kind of collapse back into the field. Guy in the car pulls into a gas station. We've got a tenant sitting here, like blank-eyed. And as soon as the car pulls up, he kind of wakes up, runs over, goes, hey, mister, what can I do for you? And he's all, you know, like happy-go-lucky, small-town gas station attendant. Guy asks where he can get a bite to eat. Guy says, oh, yeah, you want to go down to Mom's Kitchen. Straight ahead past the courthouse, block off the square, can't miss it. Best apple pie in the whole world. And the guy drives off again. He's like, he's just so happy about where he's at in America. You know, this is the greatest place in the world. And as soon as he leaves, that guy goes blank-eyed again, just completely vacant. We're not going to get a very good idea about what this is in this particular first issue. This is all just kind of laying the groundwork for later on in this series. This is going to be a 25-issue series. But there's some good stuff going on here. We're going with a lot of widescreen stuff. I guess this is around the time that Warren Ellis and Grant Morrison are starting to do their widescreen comics idea about trying to make everything cinematic and kind of epic and shit. I mean, you know, there's worse venues for epic than a New Gods book. So that's not the worst idea. And Walt's looking pretty faithful on how he's doing some backgrounds here. He's putting in a fair bit of detail. This is photocopied, but I mean, that's all right so long as it looks good from panel to panel, and I think it does. All right, so then he pulls into Mom's Diner, and he's wowing the patrons with his tales of life on the road. You get the idea he's a traveling salesman. And they're not trying too hard to appear wowed, but, you know, he doesn't really notice the difference. And when he goes to take a sip of his coffee, says, wait a minute, that tastes kind of funny, and then keels forward, clutching his gut. So things are already progressing here. Everybody's got their eyes on the guy while he's talking. Again, he's kind of oblivious. And they start hauling him into the back. Only, you know, they barely get him out the door when a police cruiser pulls up, and they have to try and be, you know, more careful. And once the cop walks in, they're all, again, like happy small town people. And there's like fun banter going on. He grabs a coffee. He kind of shoots the shit with the pretty lady at the bar here. And then he takes off again. And as soon as he does, we're going to cut to the back room where that traveling salesman has been all tied up. And they walk in brandishing like a hatchet and a knife and a fucking chainsaw. So, I mean, it's a strange, like, dark start for this comic. That doesn't feel like it has anything to do with, you know, things like the New Gods just yet. But like I said at the beginning, I've read a few Walt Simonson books in my time now. And it's to the point where I just trust Walt to point the story in the right direction and wrap it up properly. Because Walt can do that fine. You know, he's about as good a writer as he is an artist. And he's a legendary artist. All right, so from there we're going to cut to Dan Turpin. Waking up in bed screaming. Dan Turpin, he's a guy I'm like vaguely familiar with. I read Final Crisis, so I basically just know him from that. But as they say here, he's like the toughest cop in Metropolis. So his daughter runs in and goes, Dad, what is it? And Turpin sits up and goes, I don't know where or how, but as sure as I'm sitting here sweating bullets, the super spooks are back. I kind of wish I knew the context there. That'd be fun. All right, so from there we're cutting, to what really you would expect from this comic. We're cutting to the New Gods themselves. We've got the twin planets of New Genesis and Apocalypse, which both split from the original planet Urgrund. New Genesis is this idyllic, futuristic paradise, and Apocalypse is Apocalypse. And New Genesis is the home of the New Gods. And in particular, it's the home of Orion. Orion's an interesting character. Born on Apocalypse, but raised in New Genesis. When he was a kid, he was part of a hostage exchange where, yeah, he went to New Genesis and Mr. Miracle went to Apocalypse. And that was kind of a common thing for two nations that maybe had some tension between them trying to form alliances. And Orion in particular, I don't think he knew it at the time, but he is the son of Darkseid, who, is the god of evil, essentially. So, he's the son of one of the most powerful characters in the DC universe, if not the most powerful. So he's got this ridiculous power level himself, and he's kind of naturally, aggressive and brutal. But raised on New Genesis, he's had that tempered over the years. And it's an interesting time for Orion because apparently his mother has just told him that Darkseid isn't actually his father. His father was actually the captain of Darkseid's guards because he was pretty. That's not why he was the captain of the guards. That's why Orion's mother slept with him. Which kind of puts an interesting new dynamic on Orion himself. Because I imagine that one of the reasons that Orion has never killed Darkseid, which he's kind of, that's kind of the point of Orion, really, is to be at war with Darkseid. But since Darkseid is his father, there's always that kind of innate hesitance about doing that. Finding out that Darkseid isn't his father takes that away so that he can kill him without any kind of guilt. But at the same time, it puts doubt in his head about, am I even powerful enough to do this then? Maybe the son of the most powerful being in the DC universe can kill the most powerful being in the DC universe. Can the son of that powerful being's captain of the guard do it? I don't know. And from what I understand, it would later be revealed that Tigra had lied to him. Darkseid actually is his father. And she just wanted to take away any of that hesitancy and get him to go straight at Darkseid and maybe try to build up his power base more in the meantime because he thinks he needs it. Like I said, interesting dynamic shift. And this is all exposition kind of filling us in on that, except for the part that, she lied about Darkseid being his dad. Fairly basic pages. And I like the shot of Apocalypse and New Genesis is nice. But this is all, we're starting off a new number one. We have to tell you what this series is about. And for anybody new who's jumping on, which you're going to get the most of those on a number one, we need to fill you on at least the basic details of the backstory. So, that having been established, now we can cut to Orion. Orion is currently battling parademons off in the depths of space. Now, we get a pretty great splash to start with. We're going with a pretty steep angle here. We get this interesting framing device with, the heads of some of the major gods here. I believe this is High Father. That's Darkseid, obviously. I think that's, what's his name? Light Ray? Yeah, that's the one. And I think that's Orion himself then. And you don't see this kind of title page treatment from Walt too often. This is him doing a little bit extra. Got some vaguely Kirby-looking tech around the top and bottom here. A lot of Walt's tech is kind of vaguely Kirby-looking. Again, it just feels like it's taken to the next degree. And one of the side effects of Orion being told that Darkseid isn't his father, word has gotten out. And now everybody believes that Orion isn't as strong as everybody's always thought he is. So parademons are attacking him left and right. They're just foot soldiers. They don't have the kind of power to confront Orion, but they don't know that. Orion tears them apart pretty easily. We get some of that great John Workman lettering all over the place, because naturally, if Walt's going somewhere, John Workman's coming with him. And yeah, he kind of brushes them aside and then finds a boom tube to go and teleport through. But again, this is pretty great looking stuff. And it looks very Kirby. I could see any of these panels really being drawn in more of a Jack Kirby style. And it would, you wouldn't even have to change the layouts at all. That's a little different. All right, so we're going to, I believe this is basically the graveyard of the gods. So Orion has come here to commune with High Father, who's essentially like an Odin character. High Father, All Father, etc. But a wild splash to show this thing. Really showing the scale. We've got this tiny little pinprick here. That's Orion. And in the meantime, we've got this giant structure with all the light rays shooting out of it and everything. It's incredible looking stuff. And yeah, that sense of scope, it's very, 70s Kirby in particular. So while communing with High Father, Orion is going to talk about his doubts. About, how, his conscience is free and clear to go take a run at Darkseid, but he's pretty sure he's going to get swatted if he tries to take a run at Darkseid. He doesn't get any answers because I get the impression that he's just kind of talking to a gravestone, essentially. But talking it over, that helps him a little bit, so he's going to go and find some help to help work through this particular problem and just kind of determine what his course of action should be. All right, so from here, we're going to cut to Apocalypse. It's our first time here. And we're focusing on Justine. So Justine is here, and she's basically taken over for Darkseid. Darkseid and Darkseid are off planet, doing something evil, undoubtedly. And Justine has to run the place in the meantime. So what she's going to do, she's going to call up some of the parademons, the suicide jockeys, apparently that's what they're called. And she's going to send them after Tigra. And the suicide jockeys, I mean, they're basically kamikaze pilots. They're going to fly right at her and explode. And Tigra is claiming that she has authorization from Darkseid for this particular mission as the understudy for Darkseid. But once the suicide jockeys take off, she's going to change the authorization back to Darkseid's code so that if the suicide jockeys fail, then it will look like it was Darkseid's idea and he's the one who's going to get punished for it. So this is all trying to supplant Darkseid and into becoming kind of his number one lackey, which kind of seems to be the motivation for most people on Apocalypse, is to just, through cunning and trickery, increase their standing on Apocalypse. Some pretty good looking pages here. I like the look of these, the suicide jockeys, where they're like cyber skull demon things. All right, so from there we're going to cut back to Earth, where we finally see Darkseid with Darkseid, and they're doing something evil. We don't know what, but it's affecting the small town in Nebraska, where those soccer kids are stabbing the hell out of somebody. Somebody else is advancing on somebody with either a machete or a baseball bat. Could be a baseball bat. That cop who was in here earlier starts driving by. He gets cut down by hunters waiting in the field. So this small town is going kind of nuts. And, we're going to cut to a news reporter who's narrating the scene. He's out on the outskirts of town with this police cordon here. They don't want, anybody to go in with how nuts everything's getting into town. So what they're going to do is they're just going to stay back. They're going to send in a helicopter to do some surveillance first. Only the helicopter gets a little bit too close to somebody with a fucking Stinger missile, and that helicopter is going to get shot down. They don't give a shit who's watching. We're going to cut briefly to the governor's mansion, who's just getting informed of this in the middle of the night. And he thinks it's going to be a call to just inform him of what's been going on and assure him that everything's going to be all right. But apparently, no, it's somebody claiming that the leadership of the United States has corrupted to the point where they can no longer stand by, and they are seceding from the Union. What's more, they decide the police blockade that's been set up is within 12 miles of their new, seceded border, and they're not going to let that stand. So they start sending missiles at it and just start blowing up the cordon. And, you get one of those great Walt Simonson explosions in here with a gigantic John Workman sound effect as well. It's like all is well in the universe. All right, cutting back to Apocalypse, and Orion swoops in. So, last we saw him, he was looking for somebody to discuss his problem of not being strong enough to kill Darkseid. This seems like kind of a counterintuitive place to go, unless he's going to talk to maybe Mr. Miracle. Maybe that was the deal. I'm already starting to forget what's going on in this comic. And naturally, everybody knows Orion on sight, so everybody's going to start swarming him, and they don't think he's got the power to drive them off. But naturally, they're kind of wrong on that, as Orion busts through the wall of where he was trying to get to. Well, Apocalypse minions flying every which way. And it turns out he's here to seek audience with Darkseid. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And naturally, Justine, for one thing, Darkseid isn't here. Darkseid's not here. She doesn't have anywhere to direct him. But, she's not going to stand by while Orion busts into the palace and starts making demands. So she's going to try and pull out her gun on him, calling him a bastard, because everyone's calling him a bastard in this, which he doesn't seem to like too much. And Orion just hucks a parademon at her and knocks her out. So with Justine out and with the entire wave of people who originally attacked him all knocked out or dead, I would assume, he's going to move inside the palace here and find one of the computers, find out where the communications have been going from the palace to Darkseid. He's going to track those down so that he can go have his confrontation. But fun page with the big bust-in panel here. We get the close-up on Justine breaking the panel border. Big action shots that, it's not always realistic action. It's like sometimes just kind of Kirby action, which is bigger and louder. So Orion is engrossed in what he's found, which is that Darkseid is on Earth for some reason. He doesn't hear Justine behind him stirring. And Justine's not going to rush him. She knows now, at least, that whether or not he's Darkseid's son, she can't take him. But she knows somebody who probably can. He's locked up in the jail cells currently. So she's going to blow the door off, and Kalibak pulls himself out. And I like the moment here where the jailers are just like, oh shit, and they just start running. They're not even going to try and restrain him. All right, so Orion's decided that his next step is going to have to be to go to Earth so he can confront Darkseid there. Only before he can go, Kalibak finds his way to where Orion is. Orion tries to say, watch yourself. I'm not looking for a fight, but I don't have a problem getting into one. And calls him half-brother. And Kalibak's heard all the rumors that have been going around. Whether he believes them or not, it's something he can use to taunt Orion with, and again, starts calling him a bastard, which Orion objects to. Big slam in the chest, knocks him down, gets back on his rocket rig here, and is going to take off for Earth to go and confront Darkseid. And Caliban's not going to bother slowing him down. You know, he's not out or anything. He's at least faking like he's maybe out for the moment. But what he really wants is for Orion to find Darkseid and for them to have some big end-of-the-world fight where they kick the shit out of each other. And then whoever wins is going to come back to Apokolips, and Caliban is going to finish them off and become the ruler of Apokolips. It's like, oh, okay, everybody's got plans. And that's kind of where we're going to end things off, as I believe Orion is going to head for that small town where everything's going so kooky. Oh, and here we're going to get a missive from Walt where he just says how much the Fourth World comics meant to him and how it kind of revitalized him as a younger artist. And he's super stoked to be working on them now. He also talks a fair bit about how he doesn't like the way the comic industry is going these days with all of the collector-driven focus and how much the comics industry is kind of catering to that because, you know, it's making big money. And he also doesn't like how many of these books are getting new number ones all the time. And we get a little PPS here at the bottom. It says, I have, of course, suggested above that endless number one issues are part of the problem. You hold in your hands a new number one issue. The irony has not escaped me. So, Walt with a little wink there, as usual. So yeah, that's going to be Orion number one. That's a fun book. He didn't go hardcore with the visuals just yet. It's interesting because not too long before this, he was working on Star Slammers, where he was saying one of his big focuses was on trying to push the limits of panel and page design. And on this one, he's not really doing that so much. He's kind of sticking to the tried and true methods. We get a couple of pretty great pages in there, but for the most part, it's all about setup, which I mean is a good focus to start with. If we know anything about Walt, from our previous experience with his other titles like Thor, like Fantastic Four, a Walt story is just going to gain steam as it goes. So yeah, this is all about kind of reintroducing everybody, just kind of refamiliarizing you with these characters, kind of restating what their stances are, what their goals are, getting a few conflicts in there, and having this larger mystery underneath with this small town. And then he's just going to start gaining speed, and it's going to start barreling along until it's fucking cosmic explosions all over the place, I'm sure. You know, it's good stuff. It's a good number one is the important thing. You know, you get your 3 or 4 big splashes to let you know, yeah, the art's going to be sick in this. But it's nice to get a number one where the promise of an interesting story is this strong. So yeah, probably the kind of thing I would want to pick up another issue of just to kind of see where it goes. So maybe in future. But for this one anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It helps with all the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you really want to help out, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. And if you go subscribe there, that'll give you access to everything I do. So all sorts of videos, all sorts of comic book art. Also in the description, there's a link to the merch store where you can pick up some Blood Force merch. I'm working towards getting the Kickstarter going soon for Blood Force number 1. You know, slowly working towards, actually I have to like get out there and make people know I exist, which kind of goes against my very core. But if I don't, I can't get the comics made. So it's like, the sacrifices we make in having to socialize with people. Oh my God. So yeah, get your Blood Force merch and help support it. And get people asking you on the street, hey, what's that Blood Force thing? And you tell them, it's this awesome comic book. And they go, they still make comics? And then you go, oh, and then you hit them with a Blood Force mug. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. That's good too. So yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.